Okay, let me start the webinar. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be getting started shortly. Super excited for this teach-in by Keondra Bills Freeman. It's been I've been waiting for this teach-in, so I'm so excited. Please feel free to drop your name, your pronouns, and where you're based in the chat. We love to shout folks out before we get started. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. Hi from Texas. Oh, we have folks from New Zealand, Edinburgh. Oh, I love, yes, Arkansas. Thank y'all so much. Hi, folks from Bali. Thank y'all so much for being here. This is really great. Oh, we have folks from Brazil. Thank y'all so much for sharing. It's really beautiful to see folks from all over to support this amazing teaching by Keondra. All right, folks, we are going to get started because I want to honor our time and our amazing featured speaker, our teaching curator. So I would like for us to get started. So dear all, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jamie Swift, and I'm the founder and director of Black Women Radicals. Black Women Radicals, we are a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to uplifting and centering Black feminist organizing around the world. You can learn more about our work at blackwomenradicals.com. I am so excited that you are here to join us for the teach-in, Tender Mercies, Exploring Agency and Intimacy in the Personal Archives of Black Women Writers by Keondra Bills Freeman for the School for Black Feminist Politics. The School for Black Feminist Politics is the political education initiative and hub powered by Black women radicals. Established in 2020, the mission of the School for Black Feminist Politics is to empower Black feminisms and Black politics by expanding the field from transnational, intersectional, and multidisciplinary perspectives. We are so grateful to have Keondra Bills Freeman lead this much anticipated teach-in. But before I introduce our featured speaker, I would really like to thank Loshonda Lawyer and Kat Ridley for their ASL interpretation tonight. So shout out to Loshonda and Kat. I also want to thank each and every one of you who continues to support the work of Black Women Radicals. Thank you so much. And please note that this teach-in will be available on our YouTube channel. So the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and it's Black Women Radicals. With all of this being said, I'm so excited to introduce Keondra Bills Freeman, who is a Maryland-based archivist, writer, Wikipedian, and former diplomat originally from South Central Los Angeles. She is the founder of the digital archival initiative Black Women Writers Project, highlighting the contributions of Black women and gender-expansive writers to the literary canon. A poet, essayist, and fiction writer, she is the author of Things You Left Behind and the forthcoming collection For Lovers. Keondra is an alumna of Fordham University, BS, Columbia University, MPA, and University of Maryland, MLIS. She is a Society of American Archivists Digital Archive Specialist and holds a graduate certificate in museum studies from Harvard University. Her research interests include digital archiving and memory work, personal archiving, digital humanities, and Black cultural production. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So thank you so much, Keondra. It is an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to rock with us. So let me just share my presentation. Always got to have the visuals. Okay, so let's start with Cheryl Clarke in this beautiful image on the front cover of this presentation. We'll get a little bit more in a couple slides about why this is called Tender Mercies, but some idea where we're going with this is just that there is a lot of power in archival work and how things are processed and organized, and that essentially it comes down to the will of the archivist and often, or whoever it is that is preserving the materials, and that interplay with the actual agency desires of the writers themselves in throughout their lives, and particularly in thinking about the legacies, their legacies towards the end of their lives. So yeah, let's get it going. So I also want to say that I'm working through a book chapter at the moment. So some y'all get a little sneak preview. I will be reading from portions of that as well to kind of help frame certain parts of the presentation. So I want to begin with myself because I think it's really important to express my positionality when it comes to this work. I am by no means a humanities scholar. I do not consider myself so. I am a writer first and foremost. I am a mother. I am a person in community with many writers, and that is primarily what brings me to this work. My community offering is archival processing and archival practice. So I take that very seriously. And it's really come from, what is it now? I'm getting old. So 22 years of 22 years of being in community in writing community with Black women and gender expansive folks. These are just some examples from my personal archive and some lovely photographs of people I've had the chance to work with and love and commune with. And this is decidedly about personal archives because I feel very strongly about understanding the context through which the work is made. So everything in this presentation is about from journals or correspondence. It's not really focused on the writings, but I do, as again, I said, I'm not really much of a scholar in that area, but I am concerned with the ways in which the archive informs history and our understanding of literary legacies. I also want to start with some of the questions that I bring to the work to better kind of shape and frame what it is that this presentation and my work is about. Dana Williams, Dr. Dana Williams from Howard University said something at the Sites of Memory conference last year at Princeton on Toni Morrison that really has stuck with me. And it's this idea that when we come to the archive, we can't come to it feeling as if what we read means that we know these people, that we know their lives and understand everything about them. Even if you write an entire book about a person, there's so much to a life. So we can only look at these kind of as bits and pieces, not quite fragments. Some are a lot more full than fragments, but certainly never going to be the complete picture. And we shouldn't take what we learn from the archive as such. Also, I'm interested in the sacrifices that writers have made to sustain their creative lives. I think there's sometimes a flattening that happens, especially after a writer's death, about understanding the full, what it really took for them to live and be in the world. And their work kind of becomes commodified and extracted from them as a human being. So I'm really interested in kind of reanimating that part of the story of what does it actually take to write a book? What does it take to travel, to be on the road when you have children, family members that depend on you, that you love? What does it mean to be away and in service to your creative life, as well as trying to be honor the rest of the parts of your identity? So it's something that I explore and have to deal with myself as a writer. So I'm really interested in how that shows up for other writers. So how can we approach these materials with openness and exploration? And that's really a key thing, is that wonder. I am very fortunate that 90% of the time when I visit an archive, I'm not going looking for a particular item. I am just exploring. I show up, I request some boxes, and I get to see where everything takes me. And I think that's a freedom that I'm allowed as an archivist, more so than than a humanist, because yeah, I get to just really explore and be with the work, or be with the thoughts, I guess, more so than the work, the thoughts and feelings of these writers. So the other part is, going back to this idea of it not being the full story. No archive is the full story. Thinking about what are those parts of the story that appear to be missing. I say missing in quotation marks because their absence doesn't necessarily mean that it's a true, that it wasn't an intentional choice. So what parts are writers keeping for themselves, and why? And this last point to me is something that is really difficult to negotiate, and I negotiate it daily. How can we as researchers and people accessing archives negotiate the balance between our curiosity and the commitment to open access and sharing this information with others, with also wanting to protect Black women and gender expansive folks' privacy and cultural production? I don't have the answers to that, but I know it's something I ask myself whenever I'm presenting anything that I found in the archives. And even in this presentation today, even though there's no, it's not necessarily a requirement that I redacted some things, but some things I've tried to take great care in what I share about folks, because even if the writer's not living, their loved ones are, and I just try to be respectful of that. So it's always trying to balance like our curiosity and want to know more about these people whose works we love, and also understanding that we can't have an extractive relationship to them, even in death. So I start with Ann Petry because I was kind of floored when I found out more about her life, and that she was not at all interested in kind of the celebrity that came along with being a writer, and that outlook on life then informed her archive and what exists. So I'm going to read a little bit from my paper on Petry to kind of frame this part. As the first Black woman writer to sell over 1 million copies of a novel with The Street, Ann Petry resisted traditional conceptualizations of the archive as a site of memory by asserting her autonomy and embracing her right to be selectively forgotten. The papers and manuscripts of Ann Petry are a prime study in the resistance measures Petry employed throughout her life to limit visibility and legibility of the factual points of her life. Over the course of her career, Petry received critical and commercial acclaim and spent much of her career looking for ways to avoid the external demands resulting from her literary achievements. Petry countered this public expectation by employing tactics of purposeful obfuscation, redaction, and destruction of personal documentation in an effort to control public access to her interior life. Similar to Zora Neale Hurston, Petry used a range of birth years as a tactic against legibility. According to Petry's daughter, Elizabeth, her mother wanted readers to direct their attention to her writing, not her life. In her biography of her mother, Elizabeth explains that this notion preceded Ann Petry's success with The Street. Mother's rage of privacy predated her fame by many years and was a characteristic shared by other family members. Some context on Ann Petry's family is they were very well-to-do family in Connecticut. And so there is this extra layer of Black respectability that shows up even in her understanding of herself. Even in her later years, she lived to, I believe, 88. She was an older woman, but was always kind of concerned with how her work, well, mostly her life, her thoughts would be interpreted. So these two quotes that I have on this page really talk about how it was not, like, it was very clear. She made it very clear that she was not interested in allowing her personal archives to be consumed by a public. She did not donate her materials while she was living, her personal archival materials while she was living. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that her collection, her personal archival collection, is held at the Schomburg, which is a part of New York Public Library, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which is part of the New York Public Library in New York City. So her personal archives are there, but her professional manuscripts are held at Boston University. So while she was alive, she gave her papers to Boston University, the Gottlieb Center there. Also was during the time, it was before the tax code changed. And so she really did it as a way to save money, to get tax breaks. she would do it in a serial manner every few years. And it was a way for her to kind of save money, or to kind of get this tax. There was a tax incentive for her to donate, and that is well documented. So, but the personal was not her choice, and actually happened as a result of her daughter, after her death, donating those materials to the Schomburg. So this is an example of where, it's very clear that how Ann Petry felt, but in the end, and in the book, her daughter does not, in the book about her life, about Ann Petry's life, Elizabeth does not give great detail into how she came to that final decision, but she just said that she read all of the journals to see if there was an answer there, and that if her mother had changed her mind. But she never got an answer. So I am speculating that the reason was that she thought that it really would have some public good. And so it's this balance of, you're sitting with an archive that this person didn't want to be public, and also it's this really valuable resource. I've probably looked at 6 or 7 boxes, and I haven't seen the whole collection of just the journals. So yeah, she says here that she tried to disappear, and she really didn't understand why people would be interested in looking through her works. And yeah, so she had no interest in giving that particular collection to Boston. I mean, I guess even saying to not give it's one thing to not give it, that's one decision, but to destroy it also means that she wasn't interested in the lineage, even within her family, of having this information about her as well. So in my intro to this section, I talked about redaction, and Ann Petry was a big fan of redaction. So there are several journals where she has gone through and scratched out names of people. Sometimes based on the sentence structure, the grammatical structure, it's more than names, it's verbs and adjectives. So how she felt about people was very clear. She didn't want that to live on. And so she, even in the materials that she didn't, I didn't mention this part, but she actually burned a number of materials to make sure that they didn't end up in the wrong hands. And the journals that were left, she still took the time when she reread them to redact information. So this second quote is where the title of this presentation comes from. And she thought it was better to destroy the stuff herself rather than to leave it to someone else's tender mercies. And I mean, she doesn't go into detail about who that someone else will be, but as an archivist, I can only imagine her relationship with already having an established relationship with an archival institution, that she probably wasn't fond of the idea of an institution or a person in an institution having anything to say about, or trying to reinterpret essentially her own words and thoughts. So they are a great resource if you're ever in New York. I think it's a really cool example of autonomy. I think we have to complicate this notion that people who provide their archives to the public are altruistic. There's a part of that, but there's also many other reasons why people choose to or not to. It's a financial decision, or for what they don't give, it's a privacy decision, but that it's really, there's so many reasons why people are in the archive, including, and are not in the archive, including some institutional violence, of course, through exclusion and erasure, and I don't want to discount that. But yeah, so Ann Petry is a very interesting literary figure from this point of view. So Shange, Ntozake Shange, one of my favorite people to study. I primarily study her nonfiction because I think she's a really brilliant writer in that realm and a cultural and art critic. And I think she doesn't get enough praise for that side of her work. And yeah, I think she's fascinating in that she's just touched so many kinds of work and didn't really limit herself in her lifetime to the types of art that she intended to create. So Shange is also special because she gave her archive to Barnard while she was still alive. So they had a relationship with her and the entrusted members of her trust that helped manage the archive as well, to have some say in how things were processed and what things were allowed to be shared with the public. She does have some materials that are not able to be seen and are restricted. So I think that's also fascinating too, when people are saying, I understand the long-term historical value of these things, but in the immediate term, they will be restricted. So she's very fascinating. So I'll read a little bit from my paper on Shange. Ntozake Shange's approach to documenting and preserving her archives differs from many other 20th century writers in that she expressed a deliberate desire for her archival materials to influence and encourage generations of young women and scholars behind her. Shange was concerned with legacy, and perhaps more so with ensuring her work and life was not in vain. The Ntozake Shange papers, held at Barnard College of Columbia University in New York City, consist of an extensive collection of personal manuscripts, ephemera, and the work of friends and collaborators. It also contains several boxes of Shange's journals covering more than 40 years of her life. Shange was deeply involved in the decision to leave her collection to Barnard, allowing her oversight into the contents, arrangement, and description of the public collection prior to her death in 2018. Her involvement in the process ensured that the ultimate disposition of her collection aligned with her values and intentions. Shange's journals document the intimacies of her personal and professional life and do not avoid confronting the details of her struggle through single motherhood, drug addiction, and a myriad of health challenges. Shange's archives reflect a life devoted to artistic expression across a range of disciplines, always centering the difficult realities of Black life in the United States. Despite these difficulties, Shange published numerous works of fiction, art criticism, children's literature, plays, and collections of poetry. So the quote on the screen now is really her talking about this decision to leave her archive at Barnard. And I think it's fascinating because at the time that she went to Barnard, there were not very many Black students. And for some people that can make them shy away from engaging with an institution, but it seems to have drawn her closer to the institution because she talks about antecedents, right? She explicitly uses this word and this idea that she had some duty to share this information with the people who came behind her, was specifically the women and the gender nonconforming folks and gender expansive folks that study at Barnard. So yeah, I think you don't often get that explicit of a statement from folks while they're still alive about their archives. I think it's really special that even in the late days of her life, even in poor health, for her to make this time and commitment to this archive, to leave this archive. And thinking on the topic of intimacy, which is why I wanted to include Shange, there's nothing that I can tell that she really held back in her journals. And I have a couple of, this is one of my favorite excerpts. This is one that I've redacted, mostly because it deals with people who are still living. But yeah, I have so many things to work out. That line alone, I think, really resonates with me because I think her genius is such that you would believe, oh, she's got it all figured out. She must have, she had a whole play on Broadway, a successful play on Broadway. And, she talks about still having all these financial issues. And it's a real rare view into, again, what it takes to create, what it takes to live a creative life, even back then. This is 1981, where things were much more affordable, where New York City and Texas and all these places that she lived were much more affordable than they were today for an artist. And still, particularly as a single parent at this point in her life, that it was just difficult. And even still, with these kind of structural issues that she's facing about her own survival and her family's survival, she still says, how shall I write? How shall I write? And what? I have no money, no job, and a lot of debts. So yeah, I don't know. It really, there's this excerpt and there's another excerpt that I did not choose to include, that deals really squarely with her drug addiction. And I think, every time I just even reflect on reading that part of her journal, you really get to see a fuller glimpse of who she was and what she faced and her daily struggles as a writer, as a human being, first and foremost. So, but when it comes to intimacy, this is one of the most intimate archives that I have seen, just because she really did focus on that building out that personal archival side. She has the manuscripts there too as well at Barnard, but this is what the journals really make it something special. And they even include, I should have also said at the beginning of this, due to restrictions on copyright and so forth, I'm not really able to share the actual pictures of the materials that I've seen. Some things I do include, like the picture of her on the previous screen, because I think there's not enough pictures of her shared as an older person, middle-aged and above. But there are lots of rules around not kind of sharing publicly any of the photos that you take in an archive, in an institutional archive. So I am using quotes from the materials that I've seen, but if you do have the opportunity, let's see, all three of these writers happen to have collections in New York City, and they're all open to the public through registration, pre-registration, but they are able to be accessed. So if you have a chance, definitely Shange is up there on ones that you should prioritize for 20th century Black women writers. Cheryl Clarke, my fave. I can't really explain what it is about Cheryl Clarke. I think because I aspire to have this level of like swag and like moxie and confidence that Cheryl Clarke has even to this day. As a lesbian woman, really big fan of her work, but also like how she moves through the world. And so Cheryl Clarke's collection is at the Schomburg Center at part of New York Public Library. And exploring intimacy through Cheryl Clarke's collection kind of comes in many ways. It's intimate to me in my life, which I'll touch on a little bit later. And it's also just a prime example of how you can balance, or how an archive can, or as a person saving for your archive and saving materials, how you can balance these different sides of your life, from email. Well, actually, yeah, she does have emails and just general correspondence by mail, letters, alongside, the more traditional collection copies of chapbooks in her case, because she's a writer, she's a poet. So copies of early poetry and so forth, but then you really get a sense of who she is. Cheryl Clarke is still living, so she's the only example in this teaching of a living writer, and I think it's even more beautiful when the writer is still alive, because if you have questions, you can reach out to them. There's a way that you can still engage with them as their legacy is continuing to be created. So what's fascinating, I kind of cheated on this one because as I was looking for materials for this presentation, I realized that I had a scan from Spelman that is actually a part of Tony K. Bambara's papers. So this excerpt is a letter written from Cheryl Clarke to Toni Cade Bambara. And this last part where she talks about not admitting to Toni earlier that the person that she was talking about was actually her lover. And so talking about how subtle the closet is, and this concept of how the subtlety of the closet for lesbian and queer people is seen throughout her correspondence. This isn't the only place where it appears, but there's something really interesting to explore intellectually about what it means to be in Cheryl Clarke's position at this point in 1988 and where she is in her career, writing to Toni Cade Bambara and where Toni Cade is in her career, and wanting to and negotiating the power there, and her starting this letter saying like, you're the one, like you're the role model, you're so great, I really respect what you're doing. And then at the same time, against this idea of like a fear of being fully who she was in that moment. And of course, 1988, it's not the same as 2024 by any stretch of the imagination in terms of coming out. And I do not want to minimize that. I mean, it was a completely different time in that sense. And there's a different fear of being further relegated to the margins in your career. So, but I don't know, there's something really sweet and tender here. And also understanding firsthand what it's like to have that fear of, you know, being in community with someone and really respecting them and hoping that something about who you are isn't going to change their relationship with you or their view of you. And that can be a really big thing to grapple with. So I really appreciate that this exists. I don't even know if Cheryl knows this exists because it's in Atlanta. But yeah, it was a really beautiful thing to see. These images, though, for Cheryl Clarke are publicly available at Schomburg Center in their photographs division, which I also really love seeing her. These are from 1983. So the one thing about intimacy broadly, I think there's a number of times in Cheryl Clarke's correspondence where she's talking about conflict, right? Conflict with usually around ideas and political approaches, how to best organize, how to best, whose voices to bring into which conversations. You know, is this a Black only thing? Do we invite white women to the table and so forth? I really think her collection is really amazing at showing the differences even within like movements about ideology. So this particular letter that she sent to June Jordan after an event at Howard University, which is Cheryl Clarke's alma mater, just as a little anecdote. But yeah, so that she sent this letter to June Jordan after having a joint event and essentially was dealing or grappling with the fact that the audience did not seem to have a great response to what it is that they'd said on the panel. And really, and then what appears to be some sort of a, I don't know if it's discord is too strong of a word, but that it's evident in the letter that something happened in a conversation between June and Cheryl about the word feminism and the idea of feminism. And so it's really intimate to watch Cheryl navigate a somewhat low-level conflict about a difference in how, you know, approaches essentially to liberation. So I think her saying here, like, the mainstream feminist movement, well, radical feminists specifically, they have this terminology, they have this framework that works for me, but my job as a Black person is to recontextualize that for other Black people, and specifically as a Black lesbian feminist. And so I really that resonates so much with me, with this idea of that, one, that the ideas around organizing are ever evolving, so that it does take conversations and sometimes lots of time for folks to get on the same page or to just or just even watching their understanding of themselves and the work evolve over time. Yeah, she says, I do not believe we will be able to save everyone. But it's really clear that Cheryl Clarke has a lot of belief that things could change and that she had some role in making sure that that happened. And I really appreciate this correspondence for that. And then there's a little excerpt I took from one of the letters here on the bottom left, because one thing that Cheryl is good for, I mean, I don't know her personally, but one thing she's good for in the archive is writing people and telling them about an event, a book, a movie, something you need to check out. So I wanted to include that here because even in her letter, that's a very kind of serious letter to June Jordan. She's like, yeah, come see this person speak. I hope to see you there. And I love that so much. So then this is where Cheryl's story and my story intersect. I saw Cheryl Clarke's, I visited the archive for the first time like 2 days before the world shut down for COVID. And I walked into the Schomburg. I don't even think they do walk-ins anymore, but they were still doing walk-ins at this time. And they happened to have her boxes on site. And I just requested a couple boxes. I don't remember a lot about what I saw the first time. I didn't take a lot of pictures for some reason. Now I take 100 pictures every time I go to an archive, but at that point I hadn't taken very many pictures, so I don't really know. But one thing that does stand out was, well, two things is, well, okay, one, I'll mention one thing that stands out, was that she had a folder pretty much just of obituaries of Black gay men that died from AIDS. And, you know, it wasn't really something that I considered much, even then as a queer person in the world. But it was something about seeing it in the context of her archive of like, wow, you know, of course it affected gay men, but, you know, gay women, lesbians, particularly Black lesbians, were there as caretakers, as, you know, as community for these men. And I don't feel like that story is told enough. So seeing this folder that's just obituaries was pretty depressing at the moment, really saddening moment, but also a reminder of like, yeah, this caused grief in our community, like across the board. And that even people who weren't gay, these were their brothers, sisters, siblings, you know, these were people that they loved. And so it was a good reminder for me that that grief still exists. And those folks, particularly the Black creative folks in and around these communities at this time in the 80s and early 90s, that there is something that there's always going to be a great sense of loss, because that was such a, you know, a large part of that generation was lost to this disease. So, but anyway, I was so moved. And, you know, at this time I had already decided to start my kind of independent research practice and Black Women Writers Project. I decided that maybe 4 months prior to visiting this archive. But I think when I sat with Cheryl Clarke's papers, it was the first time something really clicked. Like I felt something shift in me. I don't really have words for it. It was almost like seeing what my life could be, seeing an elder, you know, a Black lesbian elder, and being able to touch all these things and postcards from Audre Lorde and Rita Dove and all these amazing writers who I read, and to see how their relationships with each other, it really kind of spurred something in me, and it made the work feel so much more urgent. So I wrote to Cheryl. I Googled, I knew that I had known before that she was a professor at Rutgers. So I just kind of like Googled to see what I could find out, Google searched, and found out that she lived in upstate New York and ran a bookstore, and with her long-term partner. And so I literally just took a note card and just was like, thank you for leaving this. Like, thank you for allowing all of your personal mementos and documents and speeches and photos and everything else that the collection contains. Thank you. And she wrote me back. So this letter is actually on the right. And I think it's a really full circle moment for me now, because it's like this will be a part of my archive. And so the cycle continues. And there's this intergenerational conversation that happens in archives that I really appreciate. Because we're always, with the archive, we're always kind of contending with the present, the past, and that these are historical documents, but also the future. We may create something out of it, or it shifts something in you, and that impacts your life. Like it is this time traveling system that I think doesn't get enough credit for really how dynamic it can be. But archives, I mean, it can be your home archives. It doesn't have to be the archives of people you don't know. It could be your archives from when you were 12. It could be your grandmother's archives, your family history. But there's something about sitting with these materials where you really feel that there's an intergenerational message that is playing out. There's an ancestral message that's playing out. And so, Cheryl Clarke's not an ancestor yet, but thank God she's still here with us. But yes, I really appreciated that she took the time to write me back. And at the end, she's also telling me about like, you gotta check out Joanna Banks, like, the bibliographer. She gave her collection to University of Pennsylvania, like, and that's what I mean. Like Cheryl wants you to know, like she wants it, and it's throughout all of her correspondence. It's really just this idea of connecting people to each other, connecting people to new ideas, new works. So Cheryl, if you ever watch this, thank you again for everything. And yeah, it's really kind of, I think I can't talk about Black Women Writers Project without talking about this particular moment that happened in 2020. And so we're not talking about 20K today, but I love this quote from her, and I use it all the time. The Claudia Tate was interviewing her for her book and asked the question, something along the lines of like, how Black writers are often asked to, are like pitted against each other in some ways, like who's the best this or who's better at this, and this idea that there can only be one at a time. And so her response, and part of her response was, we keep each other's writing alive. The literature of this crucial time is a mixed chorus. And so that underlies a lot of the ideas I have about the work that I do around constellations, that, just like you go to Toni Cade Bombar's archive at Spelman and you will see Cheryl Clarke and you will see Audre Lorde in there, and you will see pretty much almost every writer. She was very good at saving her things. So we can't, like, that archive doesn't exist in a silo. It is, you can only interpret it through this web and this constellation of other writers and other creatives. And I think that is not, I want people to really know that. If I want you to know anything, I want you to know that even your archive, even your personal archive, is not just an archive of yourself. It's an archive of the people you love, spend time with, the art that you engaged, if you're saving things for like brochures and movie tickets, and your library receipts when you check things out, that it becomes this record that is really beyond the individual. So this is just, I'm coming to the end of my presentation, and I just want to, well, actually the end of this part of the presentation. And I do want to just read a little bit more from the paper. So yeah, Black Women Writers Archives are topographies of love, resilience, autonomy, and refusal. Close readings illuminate the tenor of absences that reverberate through the interpretation of each writer's life, and ultimately the historical record. What is extant must be understood through the lens of what is not. The archives of Ann Petry, Ntozake Shange, and Cheryl Clarke provide insights into fragments of their lives as reflected through the prism of writers' autonomy, the archivist's hand, institutional context, and the researcher's imagination. If there is a truth that resides here, It is that their archives reflect the intentions with which they live their creative and personal lives. What they collected, chose to leave behind, and what ultimately becomes available to the public is the result of myriad decisions over the course of their lives. The varying degrees of opacity and transparency across their collections can be read as proxy for the plight of Black women in the United States at large. The tension between self-preservation, interiority, and public legibility, often at the expense of commodification, is one that exists beyond the limitations of the literary world. Therefore, the archive is at once a site of fugitivity and visibility. For their work to be remembered, it required that each writer be agents in the construction of their own legacies. In addition to their published works, their archives are primary tools in establishing a future that allows their thoughts, beliefs, and values to exist beyond their lifetimes. This act is not a neutral supposition. It is transtemporal travel in action. It is an offering, a bequest, an inheritance in waiting for generations yet come. So thank y'all for indulging me on the still in progress book chapter, but I definitely want to share some of what I've been working on. For those who may be new to my work, you can find me at blackwomenwritersproject.com, where I have built an archive finder where you can locate where both in physical archives and digital collections materials for Black women writers. And yeah, so check it out. I think it's in the 60s, maybe around 60, 65 Black women writers that we have right now. But the list to add is almost 200. So I'm pleasantly surprised by how much there is, how many different archival collections there are, mostly in the United States, but we primarily focus on English speaking repositories. So, but yeah, so, only because I can't speak any other language but German, not because I don't want to. So yeah, so check it out. It's a great resource to connect you to some primary sources for your research, or just because you want to just get to know new writers or learn more about the ones you already know. And then you can find me on Instagram at Black Women Writers Archive. And this is where I share things I find in digital collections related to Black women writers and gender expansive folks. So I wish there was more from gender expansive folks in the archive. So if we have any GNC gender expansive folks joining us today, please save your things so that we know about the fullness of your lives and your creative lives as well. Okay, so I wanted to leave y'all with something for what you can do to take care of your own things, because it's not even about, any sort of commercial success. Archiving and keeping your things is really about you and your own legacy and your relationship to those who you want to remember you. For some people, that will be a familial relationship, and for other people, it may be, or I should say, like a born family or family of origin. And for others, it will be loved ones that extend beyond that category. But people who love you want to know about your life. And of course, you always have if you don't want to be remembered, you can always exclude or choose not to save. But for those who do, here's a few who aren't interested in that. Here's a couple things to consider. So, what do the archives of the future look like? And how would you like to or not like to be remembered? If the archive of the future is primarily digital, are you taking care of your digital materials so that you can be in that future, in that archive of the future? What artifacts or documents do you wish you had from a loved one, ancestor, or historical moment? I like to ask people this because I think when we think about our own lives, we have a very limited view about what's valuable. But when we ask about like your mom, your grandmother, your best friend's family, or whoever it is that's important to you, or a historical moment, what do you wish you had? And then work back from that. If it's something you're interested in seeing and you haven't seen, then maybe someone else will be interested in that from you as well. So I can't even tell you how many people I've talked to about saving, whether it's digital files or physical files, or just, you know, ephemera. Ephemera is always a tough one because people think it's no longer in use, so I can throw it away. But all those flyers, brochures from work that you've done, especially the early days, you know, if when you're first getting started in a craft, I think is really important because you can never recreate those things. You can never recreate the journals from when you first tried an artistic practice, or when you were learning something, or you first met your writing group, or you first went to traveled to another city. I mean, you can't really, your memory is very unreliable. So having documentation is nice for yourself as well to reflect on. And then think about now, just take a moment and think about 2 or 3 items that you would want to be preserved for the future. And thinking through those items, who would you envision accessing these items? Because sometimes that can be helpful too. So before I had a child, I always said that I didn't even know if I was going to have one, but before I had a child, I said, you know, I've been journaling since I was 12, and I have all of those journals still, and I've digitized all of them. I've scanned all of them into a cloud-based server. And when the whole time I'm just like my grandkids, like my grandkids didn't have a kid, but like that was the vision of the reason I needed to save it. And it was because I've never met my grandmother. She died when my mom was 8, and there's no images of her really. No one has told me any stories about her. Any stories that remain are around her domesticity, which is problematic. So she died at like 33 or 34. So I think there's this way that I feel like I don't want my grandchildren or the people that I love to have to wonder about the things I cared about and that were important to me. So sometimes by envisioning who we want to engage our archive, it can also you know, help stimulate us and with really sticking with the practice. So how can you get started? Take a look at what do you have? What do you want to keep? I think this is the thing about what you keep is always tough, particularly for Black folks, particularly in this era of gentrification, with having to move a lot of housing instability. It can be really hard to think you might keep something for 50, 60 years. How do you even transport it, you know, with the number of times people are having to move in this generation? And so that is obviously a very big consideration in terms of physical things. But if you can't keep them, consider taking a photograph of it, like just on your phone, high res image, so that you have a memory of it and that there's a touchstone there if you ever want to revisit it. Consider where it will live. And this is particularly for people who have a pretty dedicated creative life. Like, do you think it's something that you want to live in an institution? Do you want to start your own archive and control your own legacy? Do you want to start or join a community archive or contribute to a community archive? So there are so many options in how and where your materials can go. So just know that just because you don't think you'll ever be collected by like Yale University and be with Langston Hughes papers, that means that there's no in between. But certainly keeping things, at least the most valuable things to you and to what you feel represents your life, that is really the core of it. But just try to have an idea of where you think, you know, you would want it to live. It's particularly helpful the further along in your career you get. But yeah, it's also just good for envisioning. So prioritize how much physical space and our cloud-based storage do you have? So, and what is your capacity to preserve? This is a real one. I'm a digital archivist. I have 20,000 images at least on my phone. No, I have not organized them. And I am a whole 9-to-5 archivist. And so, you know, this is not just a problem or a challenge that non-professionals have. It's definitely just the time we live in. So just figuring out what are the most important things, if you have to limit it, and making sure that those most important things stay organized and are backed up, which leads into number 4, save it in multiple locations, even if you can't do, like I can't do it wouldn't even be smart for me to do all 20,000 images. But if I just at least have all my favorites folder like backed up, so you know that those will always be there. Also be careful of duplicates. That's a big thing with photos, but it also happens with like magazines, books, and try to get rid of those over time instead of waiting. I don't advise anyone to wait till their late years to get this work started, just because when you forget what things even were, and two, you'll have so much stuff. So if you are younger, it's never too early to start taking a look at what you have, and especially trying to get rid of any duplicative things. And don't forget email. Nobody, or text messages, all these ways that we communicate that aren't like physical. There are ways, of course, to back up email, but it's hard. I'm not, even as a digital archivist, there's not a real straightforward way to do it. Well, straightforward way to back it up, not a straightforward way to use it in the future. So print them out, print out those really important emails and put them in a folder, ACID-free folder, because yeah, that's how we communicate. It's not letters really anymore. So shout out to the people who are keeping letter writing alive, because that's super, super critical, and really great to have for the archive too. This point here though, make sure you have consent. I used to work in with students, like in a university archive. And you might have a student organizer who is giving over images of like protests and so forth. And then it's like, but did you get permission from all these people in this image to donate these materials? So it kind of is the same way for your personal archive. You don't want to, if you are saving personal or sensitive conversations, then just make sure that you have that permission from the folks whose information it contains, or just save it in a confidential manner so that others can't find it if it's for your personal use. Stay organized. Tags, inventories, consistent file naming, whatever you can do, even if you do one, you don't have to do all, but stay organized. That's the best way. And I had to shout out Build Your Archive, particularly Sierra King, really doing really amazing work. If you had to start somewhere, I would start there, because out of this list of 3 sites, it's going to be most contextualized for creative life, most contextualized for Black folks, and very easy to understand. And Sierra often offers live kind of joint collective archiving sessions, so that you can kind of take that time to organize your collection together with other folks. National Archives is the National Archives of the USA. They have a good site on family archives, which will be useful for pretty much any personal archival situation. They have a lot of great information. And the bottom link, that is really more for really useful if you're pretty advanced in your archival practice and you want to do things like remediate mold. What do you do if there's a big storm in Texas? Like, what happens if your archive gets wet? Like, how do you try to remediate some of that stuff, and how do you reduce risks to your collection? So when that's like 2.0, I would say, but definitely the first 2 links, if you're just getting started and wanting to like understand how to organize things and some tools you can use, then I would definitely suggest those. Oh, that is it. How are we doing on time? Okay,
You're
good.
Great on time, Keondra. Like, we could have listened to you all day. Okay. Let me come back into the screen. I don't think folks can you see me, Keondra? Okay. Can everyone see me? I just want to make sure, because I can't see myself. Okay, perfect. Keondra, I want to just say thank you so much. To be honest, I don't want to sound a little weird, but I always wanted to work with you, okay? And so when I was able to meet you, I think last year, it was a joy. And then to have you lead a teach-in, which I knew was going to be amazing, because so many people from around the world were messaging me for this recording afterwards and hadn't even started. I just want to thank you so much for just I can just tell the love that you have for Black women and gender expansive writers and the joy and the care that you have. It's so tangible. And I really just appreciate all you do. And I just want to give you your flowers because I know it's not easy doing this work.
Thank you.
Particularly like not having a team and doing all these different things. And that is the type of labor that Black women and gender expansive people have always done. But I just want all the blessings for you, the support, because you are really doing a revolutionary work for us to even understand what intimacy and care looks like in the archives and our responsibility, right, in doing memory work. So y'all better listen to Keondra, okay? I also want to say that there will be like a Q&A portion of the conversation. So if you have any questions for Keondra, please use the Q&A button at the bottom to ask your questions. And we may not be able to get to all the questions, so don't hurt me now, but we'll do our best, right? So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button. And this conversation will be available on Black Women Radicals YouTube, which is YouTube channel, which is Black Women Radicals. So I think we have one question so far, Keondra, and the question is there a way to get involved with Black Women Writers Project Archive or any other related sources folks know of?
Yeah, well, you can come to our website, blackwomenwritersproject.com, and there's a contact form. Right now, I'm not taking any interns or anything because I don't believe in unpaid labor, so I need to raise some more money before having people intern. But we do occasionally take volunteers, and we'll probably soon start back again with the Wikipedia editing portion of our work, to training people how to edit Wikipedia pages with the thought of focusing on Black women writers. Let's see. Oh gosh, there's so many questions coming in. Jamie, do I just some more?
So I'll help you with it because don't worry. This happens often, and trust me, if I was in your position, I would feel overwhelmed too, but I got your back. So
I do want to answer this question though from Nia's.
Which one?
I don't know if somebody already answered it. Are they still together? I'm wondering if this is about Cheryl Clarke. No, this is a new partner, but they had a good run though. At that point, it was 5 years, so I think they stayed together a little bit longer than that.
Thank you. The next question I see is, how do you maintain the commitment to continue to document your personal archives? And I'll put this in the chat too.
Honestly, I would say some structure. So the same way that, we use reminders for everything else on our phone, put in a recurring reminder. I have a recurring reminder the first of every month to back up my computer. Because even if I don't have time to actually select what to keep, I know I have a backup. It's just like anything else. Just like you remember to take your vitamin or whatever, like you have to integrate it. Just go ahead and put them all in the calendar now if you're a calendar person. Because that's, to me, you just need an external reminder. Also, I talk about build your archive, find community of folks that you can do it with on a regular basis, and then you don't have to feel alone, because it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming when you have like tons of things. And also maybe a good reminder to take things slow, and don't feel like it all has to be done at once. Like I'm a whole archivist, and I still said I'm giving myself the entirety of 2025 to focus on my digital archive, because I know that's how long and the thing also about archival work, in my opinion, is that it really is slow, intentional work. It's not a rush to the finish line. So, I mean, of course, we don't know how long we have on this planet, but even still, it should be a thing you sit with, really engage, and not necessarily feel like it's a task that you just have to check off. Because sometimes, let me tell you, you go back to your archive, there's going to be days that you just want to look at pictures. Like you think you're going to sit down and process, and then you see some picture that you haven't seen in 10, 15 years, and you're like, who was this person? What was their name? You're texting your friend. Do you remember where we were? And that to me is part of the process and what makes it so joyful. So take all the time you need, but just try to be consistent with it.
Perfect. Thank you, Keondra. So the next question I see here is, whose archive was the most challenging to get through?
I don't think anyone's been particularly challenging. Let me think about that though. I think honestly, it's not, I haven't had any problems with once I'm in an archive. You know, I don't think any of them have been very challenging. Often the challenge is whether or not there's digital collections. To me, that's, I'm like, I can't afford to travel to every major city to go see Black women writers' materials. And unfortunately, and there's a number of reasons, including copyright restrictions, why digital collections don't exist. But it can be really hard as a person who's not focused on one writer. Since my interest is literally as many people's archives as I can get my hands on, it kind of limits me because I'm not willing and I can't afford to hop on a plane. So it's often like the actual access to the archive is the challenge more so than challenging to go through it. But no, I'm trying to think. There was one that was really heavy. I mean, the Shange's was really heavy. There's a part where she talks about overdosing in front of a family member. Like, it's depressing. Like, I actually no, not that was a big one though. But also Lorraine Hansberry. I was just talking on the internet about this. I went to see Lorraine Hansberry's archive at the Schomburg Center, I think last month or 6 weeks ago, and it just like she was depressed the whole like, and then she got cancer, so it was like, dang, you're already having a hard time, you know, and then to be so brilliant, to be so committed to the liberation of Black people, to have so much community and to be so alone, that's a hard legacy to accept, you know. And I think even reading Imani Perry's book about it, I did not grasp it until I saw and sat there. And there's a series of notes. For her husband kept, she was queer, but she, you know, still maintained a good relationship with her husband that eventually became her ex-husband. And he managed all of her archive. And he kept every like note, or I don't know about every, but there's at least 50 or 100 notes that came with flowers that were sent when she was sick. The latter part of her illness, where it was kind of clear that she wasn't going to recover. And people were literally saying things like, we need you to recover so that we can get another play. I was just like, what? Like numerous people, not one or two. And I'm like, are these her friends? Are these just random people out in the world? I don't have, you know, I'm not a Lorraine Hansberry scholar, so I can't say. But I was really just taken aback. And I think that really hurt my heart, because it was like she gave so much and y'all still wanted more. She gave so much. It was mid-30s, died in her mid-30s, and still y'all asking, what can we commodify about a Black woman's art? And that just, I don't know. It made me not have a lot of hope in that moment. But yeah, that's actually probably the answer, Lorraine Hansberry.
Thank you so much, Keondra. And yeah, I just got really upset just hearing about that, because it just speaks across the board. I think someone said it in the chat about the exploitation of Black women's labor. And so I could imagine just how heavy that is. So the next question.
There's some questions in the Q&A too, so I don't know if you are
No, I'm about to wait, are you seeing the same thing? I'm seeing it here. It's like 23 of them.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I see it. Like the next question is, what are some mistakes people should know about when starting their archive journey?
The first thing that comes to mind is not labeling photographs. Let me tell you something. Gwendolyn Brooks, right? Preeminent Black writer. If you go to her collection, there's tons of images and they just don't know who these people are. And so she took all this care to save these just elaborate albums, photo albums, but most of the images aren't marked. And so you have no, unless you know you're a close confidant, maybe, there's no way to even understand what she was saving and why, because you don't even know who the person is. So it seems really simple, but at a minimum, first and last name and year. If you can do the actual date or the month and year, even better. But I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is just like not labeling clearly what something is. This goes for ephemera as well, because just the nature of ephemera is that people don't often put the year. Like, I don't even know if the flyer for this program said 2024. So you have to, you know, as you're collecting these things, you have to do your due diligence of like, okay, put it in an envelope and write the address. I mean, write the date on it. So you know it was 2024. So it's like all these little things that we don't think about. But I think in my experience engaging other people's archives, it's really just the lack of description and labeling so that people have the context for what that material means.
Okay, so the next question is, and we're probably going to ask about, Keondra, we're not going to get through all these, but about 2 to 3 more. But the next question is, do you have any advice on reaching out to institutional archives? I feel like I've reached out to a few with no response and wondering if it's because I'm not currently in school, nor is it my profession.
Child, they don't answer my emails too. So let me just, and I got all of that, right? Like I do this all the time. I unfortunately, it is how some institutions choose to run. I can't even, there was a brief period of time, a year, where I had a Harvard email and everybody responded to my emails. But other than that, I mean, yeah, I don't have any advice for that because it's really a messed up system. And that's why, like, a lot, like the Schomburg's not like that. You know, there's plenty of places that, but that's because it's a public, like, you know, a public institutions. Definitely some of the private places are try to be a little exclusive by just not responding. But there's not, I don't know, maybe other people can drop their commentary in the chat to help this person. But in my experience, there's nothing I've been able to do to get those people to respond. Not multiple emails, not emailing from a certain, like an institutional email versus my like regular personal Gmail. So yeah.
Perfect. So the next question I see is, what are some of your organizational systems for archival work, personal/independent research work, etc.? Thank you for your work.
Okay, organizational. I don't know if I'm interpreting this question right, but thinking about when I do archival research, well, it starts really when I'm there and taking very good notes. So I take notes, like every time I take an image, I write down what box and folder it is and a description of what's in that image, so that, like, even today I had to like go back to those handwritten notes to figure out where certain, you know, letters came from and images. And that you know, keep that note with the images as well. Take a picture of the notes and keep it with the images as well. So on that side, that's how I organize that work, is just making sure that, like, keeping things by date and by collection level. So even if I went and saw Lorraine Hansberry and Cheryl Clarke on the same day, those would still go in their, you know, respective folders. But when it comes to organizational systems for personal archives, like my own archives, the best that I can do with my limited time is often just having a place that things belong. So right now I have 2 boxes where every time I get something new, like I went to an event or something, I put a little note on it, I place it in that box. And what ends up happening is that by time they're in order. So that helps contextualize in case I missed something. But it also is like a reminder that once this box is full, this should be prioritized for digitization or at least appraisal, to just look and see what's there. Do I want to save it? Do I just want a digital scan and I can throw away the original? Like, what is the preservation value of it? So just like making sure that that workflow is really clear, like the things that have already been processed are not mixed with the things that have not been. But it's a pretty simple process. And this can actually, you can see one behind me, this white box, that's Archival. That's like the pre-box. And the boxes up here, this is the stuff that's already been processed.
So how do you determine what to redact in your personal archive and in the archival material that you share? Is there a spiritual component to your method and practice?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely something spiritual. I mean, I think, so I mean, when I read some of this stuff in Shange's, I was like, would I want somebody, a third party, not in my family, right, to take this information and print it in a book? Would I want this in a documentary? And it's not even about like, it's not necessarily about like some sort of weird respectability. It's about the privacy. Is so intimate. Some of this stuff is so intimate that you're just like, what is the research value so great? If I, like I said that, or we all know through the history and the research that Shange, had challenges with addiction. Did I need to actually, to get that point across, did I need to put that in my presentation, the actual overdose quotes and everything that she said? No. But so it's really just trying to, but I think you get a sense when you feel it, like you feel it when you see it, like, ooh, I don't know if that's for everybody, but I'm really glad that it exists and I'm glad that I got to experience it. But it is not my message to pass along. It is not, that's not my role here, because, like people get weird about wanting to feel like they know somebody or have like some intimate detail that you don't know. And so I'm like, I always try to make sure I'm not trying to do that. Like, do I want to share this because it means something to me and it moved me? Or am I trying to share it to be like, ooh, look at the tea, right? Like, so, but it is, I guess it is spiritual in the sense that it is an emotional experience more so than an intellectual engagement of whatever it is I'm looking at. So.
Keondra, do you have space for one more question or capacity?
Sure.
Okay. So this will be our last question, y'all. I'm so sorry because I want to ask Keondra questions too. How do you contend with the fact that many of our favorites' work and images are held within institutions that can be the antithesis to our existence?
See, like this is a dissertation level answer. So I'm gonna try. I will just say that I feel very heartened by the fact that more and more independent archives are popping up, and more digital curatorial projects are popping up to counterbalance this. But what I try to remember is that it was in the case of where the writer was alive and made the decision on where to place their papers, like Toni Morrison's at Princeton. I really hate that. I really hate that for all of us. But I mean, there's the Random House papers at Columbia too. But I hate that for us. But it was her decision, and she doesn't owe me anymore. She doesn't owe me anything. She already gave so much. If she wants to go to Princeton, she wants to go to Princeton. If Princeton had a big check and she was thinking about the inheritance of her children, that's her decision, and I can't be mad at it. And so even though it makes me sad, it's like, I don't want to have to write a letter to go to Princeton or whatever they require. I have no idea, but I don't want to go through the hurdles, but I have to respect that it's her life. It's her decision. I think in the case where, there's a third party broker, which happens, where like a rare book dealer will buy a collection and then sell it to a library, of course, or archive. Those make me pretty upset. But I try to remember that the fact that the stuff exists at all is amazing, and just hope that more archives, more traditional institutional archives can come along where the rest of archival practice is going, which is that access really is of utmost importance, and that we don't, it doesn't really serve anyone to have things be gate kept. I mean, I shouldn't say it doesn't serve anyone. It definitely doesn't serve Black folks. So.
Well, I'm so happy someone asked that question. Thank you. That was like a mic drop question. But Keondra, I really want to say thank you so much again for this brilliant teaching. You should see all these comments in the chat and all these amazing. Oh, trust me, I got you. And all these amazing comments on social media, just really saying like this is what people needed. I also needed just you making us think more about our archive, how we want to be remembered, because I think we are walking archives. And so thank you for just your brilliance and your expertise. And so I look forward to, please support Black Women Writers Archive. Donate, support, so that we can support Keondra to continue this beautiful, beautiful work. Thank y'all so much for joining us. And thank you to Kat and Gloshonda for your amazing ASL interpretation. I always appreciate you all. And once again, this teaching will be available on our YouTube channel. So please give me some time to upload, y'all. I will promise to upload it. So thank you again, Keondra. Woo-hoo.
Thank you for everybody who joined.
Oh, the YouTube, y'all, is Black Women Radicals, and we'll also share on our social media. Thank y'all. Have a good one. Ciao, y'all.